Welcome, my friends. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm Jen Hilman, and in this video, I'm going to show you some techniques to relieve low back and sciatic pain. I'd like to give a special thanks to my friend, Maressa Lynn, lovely massage model today. Maressa is an empowerment and intimacy guide. You can visit her website, maressalynn.com, to learn more. And while you're at it, go ahead and leave a comment below and let me know where is your favorite place to be massaged. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And when you're ready, grab a partner and let's get into some massage. So you'll be able to apply these techniques during the course of any full body massage. And if you are just going to be focusing on the low back, you can open with just some basic spinal decompression, using the heels and palms of your hands along either side of the spine. I'm keeping my arms extended and lifting up through my chest, so it's no pressure on my own body. And just one at a time, walk my hands down the back. And I'm applying a down and out kind of pressure. So pressing down to connect to the tissue, and then pressing towards the pelvis, towards the sacrum, to help decompress any pressure in the low back and the SI joint. So as you come down to the top of the pelvis, the top of the hips, the top of the sacrum, you can place your hands there. And I'm really using the heel of my thumb on either side to apply the greatest amount of pressure, just opening up the space right there at like L5 and the top of the sacrum. So we want to open up that space. And I love these long traction holds because it really gives the body a chance to unwind. And sometimes it feels like you're not doing anything. But by applying this steady pressure, the work is happening inside the body. So from here, I'm just going to place my whole palm in contact with her sacrum, and I'm still applying that downward pressure. Then from here, I'll begin to apply an opposing stretch with the opposite hand. So now I'm actually pulling some traction towards the head. So now we're creating a little opposition, deepening the stretch, creating more space along the spine. Then you can come all the way up to the base of the head, just giving a gentle hold here, and then again tractioning one hand down the sacrum and one hand up along the back of the neck. So we get a full stretch on the entire length of the spine. And as you're ready to come out, you can just gently come up towards the head and even give a little scalp massage just to aid in that feeling of relaxation. And then when you're ready, we'll go ahead and transition to the low back and to the hip so we can start to loosen up those areas. Now, as I come alongside her body, for these techniques, I'm really going to want to undrape to the low back. I like having a blanket because it helps to secure your sheet in place when you go ahead and undrape the leg. I like to tuck the sheet down alongside the body so your sheet doesn't move. And then I'll also tuck the sheet down between the leg. So we have a large area that's exposed, but the sheet is nicely tucked in place so everybody feels comfortable. Now from here we can start to apply a little bit of oil. I am using some of the Conacrism CBD cream. It's one of my favorites, really great for pain relief and very moisturizing for the skin. So I'm just going to start to warm the oil in my hands and apply it into the area that I'm going to be working. So I'll actually be working up into the low back, across the glutes, down alongside the hip, and I'll even be working my way down the top of the thigh. So this time to apply the oil is also great for warming up the body, warming up the tissue, creating a little heat and helping your partner's body to relax. Now, once we have the oil applied, we can start to focus in on the areas where we're going to be working. So when it comes to relieving that sciatic pain, we really want to focus in the SI joint as well as down the edge of the sacrum and across the glutes, because these are the muscles that are mostly responsible for that tension that is activating the sciatic nerve. So what I'm starting with here is just a light fist, and I'm using the flat parts of my knuckles to trace some broad strokes from the edge of the sacrum and going as far down the side of the hip as I can. So I'm using a pretty firm pressure here, but my pressure is broad. So I'm not getting into specific trigger points right now. I'm not doing deep tissue massage necessarily. This is really more of a traction with some pressure. So just stretching out those muscles along the glutes. And then of course we want to address the muscles in the low back as well. So again, working with a light fist, I'm now coming to like the short part of my knuckles and making some upward circles. So you can see moving from the SI joint up towards the last rib and circling out and down. So this is helping to loosen up the QL, quadratus lumborum, and releasing tension in the low back, which, you know, it's part of that SI joint. It's the sacrum and it's the top of the hip coming together, and that is joined right in the low back and all these attachments. So we want to loosen all of that up. You can also come into some petrissage in the low back, kneading that muscle tissue. And then I like to do an opposing traction, a cross hand traction. So I'm bringing one hand to the top of the hip, and then I'm going to bring my opposite hand up and over, crisscrossing the forearms and applying traction away from each other. So this allows you to get a really great amount of pressure with very little effort when you do this cross arm traction. So again, we're just working to create space. Yeah, and I can feel her body's kind of like twitching and starting to relax a little bit. So just stay with it, right? Doing these slow, sustained holds. All right. Now, I'm going to go ahead and cover up the low back because at this point I'm going to focus more on the leg and the hip. So coming down towards her knee, I can now do some long effleurage strokes from the knee up to the hip. Now, because we're focusing specifically on like relieving the sciatic tension, I'm focusing a little more of my technique along the lateral part of the leg, along the outside part of the leg, because it's that lateral hamstring and the IT band that are the most tight here. So we want to work alongside the hip. So after doing a few long, broad strokes from the knee, you can come all the way up into the glutes, coming all the way up and over the hip. And if you can, just bringing it all the way back down the side. Now, this is one of my favorite ways to access that IT band, that outer band of tissue. We're actually going to pick up the ankle and bend the knee here. And I like to give just a little wiggle to relax any tension around the knee, relax the hip. So I like to just give the leg a little wiggle here. You can even, to kind of test their relaxation, if you interlace your hands around her ankle, lift with your legs, gently lift the knee away from the table. And you can even give a little wiggle there. And that will help to increase that relaxation and release in the hip. Now, we're going to open the leg out to the side. So the easiest way to do this is to come in and place your shoulder under the ankle and use the same hand to hold the back of the heel. So now you have a nice, easy leverage to be able to lift like any size leg. Now we're going to open out the leg to the sides. You want to make sure your draping is nice and tucked. Lift with your legs, lifting the knee slightly away from the table. Then reach your free hand under the knee. Open the knee out to the side, and then we release the ankle down. So now we have this great external rotation in the hip, which is going to allow us direct access into the IT band. So again, we can come back to those nice long strokes from the knee up into the hip, and you'll feel the difference. You know, that IT band is generally pretty taut, and it needs to be because it holds the knee in place and it holds the hip together. So a healthy amount of tension is good, but we want to stretch it out so it's not all congested in there. So again, the same principle applies. So we go all the way up from the knee to the hip, and then you can come up and over the hip bone and come all the way along down the outer part of the glutes, right? Now, another fun technique that you can do here is to actually bring your knee up onto the table, bump it up behind your partner's shin. So now you have two free hands to do the work, and this leg isn't going to go anywhere. So I like to use my knuckles. Again, I feel like it gives you a firm amount of pressure without being too direct. So these areas can be really loaded with trigger points, a lot of sensitive areas like in the glutes and the IT band. So, you know, unless you're doing a really specifically deep tissue technique to release those trigger points, I like to work with a little bit more of a broad pressure that still allows me to get deep access without, you know, waking it up too much. We want to help the body relax as much as possible. So I'm coming all the way up and working the area around the hip itself, like around that outer part of the hip. So this is an area that often gets neglected and it's difficult to stretch on your own. So when you get into some of the massage, like working that outer part of the hip feels great. And when you're complete, we're going to bring the leg back to its original position. So again, I'm just going to pick up the ankle. Can even give a little bit of a wiggle here. And I'm basically going to go out the same way that I came in. So I'm coming down to bring my shoulder under the foot. I'm going to give her just a little lift and gently bring the leg back to center and gently lower the leg down to the table. Now, once you extend the leg, you can come down to the ankle and do a nice traction pull, just stretching the whole leg and hip. It's a nice way to round it out and get ready to move on to the second side. So again, we are going to come to the second side and undrape all the way to the low back. So I really enjoy using the blanket there because it just helps kind of hold everything in place. And then I'll bring the sheet down and give it a little tuck under the side as well. All right. And then again, I'll just start by applying some of the oil here. Warming it in my hands and then beginning to apply it to the body. So again, we're going to be working all the way up to the low back. So you want to be sure and smooth the oil across the entire area we're going to be working. And once you've applied the oil evenly, we'll start to work those slow, long effleurage strokes from the knee all the way up to the hip and all the way up over the glutes, coming all the way down. And I usually like to repeat this maybe 3 times, coming all the way up and over. And again, just working on focusing my pressure, focusing my attention along the lateral part of the leg and all the way up to the lateral part of the hip. And after working those long strokes up the leg, we can come up and start to focus a little more in the glutes. So we're using the broad, flat parts of the knuckles to trace that line from the edge of the sacrum down the outside of the hip. So the sacrum is a big attachment site. You could almost think of it like city center. That's where all of the muscles and the ligaments are coming together and they all attach at the sacrum. So there's a lot of congestion that can happen in this area. So working down the outer hip, starting at the sacrum point, just really helps to open things up. And then of course we can take this up into the low back. So here I'm going to use the shorter part of my knuckles because it's a smaller space, right? With the glutes, I'm using the broad knuckles. coming into the low back, I want to work a little more of the flat parts, the short parts of my knuckles. So we can make those circular movements coming from the low back up towards the floating rib. And then you can come in and work some petrissage here as well. Really working that QL, working all the way up and down. Okay, then we can try that cross arm stretch. So I like to bring my first hand to the hip and then bring the second hand up and over. And once I'm in place, begin to stretch the hands in opposite directions. And I'm really using my legs here, kind of bending into my legs to help me sink deeper into the tissue. So I'm not pushing with my arms or hunching with my back. I'm really just working leverage and gravity in my favor. And after coming into that full stretch, we can start to come back down. Now I'm going to cover the back here because now we're going to just focus a little more on the leg and the hip. We're going to practice opening the knee out towards the side. So we'll gently lift the ankle. You can give it a little wiggle, just encouraging the hip and the knee to relax. Then we can interlace your hands around the ankle and just lifting with your legs. Just a little bounce, a little wiggle, help releasing any tension there. All right, then we're going to open the knee out to the side. So turn your shoulder in and we create a little ledge for the foot. And then you can take your same hand as shoulder, and now you have that good lift for the knee. Then you'll take your free hand, scoop it under the leg, and just gently guide the leg open and fold the foot down. So now we have this great open access, and we can come back to our effleurage along the IT band. From the knee, up and over the hip. You want to come as far down the side of the hip as you can. And we can repeat that as many times as you have time for. Coming up and over. Then after you do these long strokes, remember you can bring your knee up onto the table and just support your partner's leg there. And now you have two free hands to do a little more specific work into the IT band. Coming back to those knuckles, kind of like a cat paw. Massaging circles around the outer hip. Right, so there's a lot of muscles that bring the hip together. So we want to be sure and work the whole area in order to release that tension. And when you're complete, we'll gently guide the leg back to place, just the same way we came in. You can lift the ankle, just shake it out gently. And you'll step your foot down, scoop your shoulder under, gently lift the leg, and guide it back to place. You can let the ankle come down, and if you want to do a traction pull there, you can hold onto the ankle, stretch the whole length of the leg. Any finishing moves that will round out and complete the movement. Well, thanks so much for joining me. I hope that you have found these techniques to be insightful and helpful along your massage journey. And many thanks to Maressa for being such a generous and gracious massage model. Don't forget to visit her website, and you can also visit mine at jenhilman.com. I look forward to seeing you next time. Namaste.